Chapter 4. Desert Worm Dinner. Saren steers through the sparse evening traffic of the Central District as they approach Raylan's apartment building. The wet streets have dried up after the rain. The evening winds carry the moist air toward the ocean.
That's the fourth cop car since we left the freeway.
Taryn murmurs uneasily as she scans the traffic nervously.
Relax, they're not looking for us.
Saren eases Taryn's worries.
Central is rich. A lot of loot lying around. The cops just protect it.
She adds nonchalantly. Saren's moral ambiguities toward the rich include a rather open interpretation of possession.
Yeah, the city is still on the edge.
Taryn says.
The vote didn't help.
She adds, referring to the Federal Assembly vote to advance the motion for Winslow's private army.
You've seen the people in Little Manth today.
Taryn tells her.
This is not over.
She muses about their safe house.
We may have to shut down the cafe if the cops clamp down on Little Manth.
Saren is irritated at Taryn's thoughts. She brakes harder than necessary and threads the car into a tight parking space.
Listen to yourself.
Saren turns to face her angrily, chiding her lover's naivety.
Shut down the cafe? Sweetie, we are not ECOS anymore.
The shock of hearing the words spoken aloud stuns both into silence. After a while, Saren lets go of the steering wheel and gently draws Taryn in to rest her forehead against hers.
I'm sorry,
Saren says quietly.
but it's the truth. Whatever happens, this part of our life is over.
I know, baby. It's just so hard to accept.
Taryn softly responds, thankful to have Saren by her side. The polished marble front of Raylan's building reflects the city's evening lights and mirrors the figures of the two Len approaching the entrance. It also mirrors the contour of a black sedan parked among other cars on the other side of the street.
So how are we playing this?
Saren asks while opening the entrance door.
I don't know. Casual.
Taryn suggests, unsure herself on how to handle the situation. She lays out the rules.
No one needs to know what's going on. And when Evans Triple leaves, we leave.
Both recall their usual end to the days in Raylan's apartment, embracing their bodies and falling asleep among crumpled sheets. Nothing will be the same anymore. Saren taps the intercom, rotating her shoulders and loosening her neck as if starting the first round of a fight. She smiles and waves into the video sensor while talking to Taryn.
Who knows?
She quietly tells her.
Maybe Ray has an ace up his sleeve.
The doors slide open and they walk toward the elevators. Saren looks at her best friend and tells her,
I'm still not done believing, you know.
Raylan exhales deeply at the sound of the door and tries to gather his strength. His day was filled with organizing teams to control agitated worker crowds at Winslow Industries production plants and hold meetings with angry labor union functionaries. On top of that, his access to the Winslow mainframe has been downgraded to clerk status. He opens the door and tries a weak smile.
Finally, someone to lift my spirits. Come on in.
He spreads his arms for a welcome hug. Both Len fall into the embrace, unsure if it's acting or real. For Raylan, the brief embrace eases many of the worries that have piled up inside him. Taryn breaks the embrace first and sniffs the air.
That smells delicious.
She says, curious as she enters the living area. Drawn to the full earthy scent, Taryn enters the kitchen and finds a large frying pan on an inductor stove. Inside, a single thick piece of white, barely textured meat sizzles in brownish oil. The complex spice aroma of fresh, warm manth bread fills her nose, and finding the bread tray, she hungrily grabs a piece, dunking it into a sauce boat beside it.
Hey, wait for the others.
Saren chides Taryn playfully, but also grabs a slice of bread. Gazing at the large piece of sizzling meat, she says with wide eyes,
So that's desert worm fillet. Smells awesome, like real meat, but fuller.
She tries to describe the scent.
Yeah, it's more balanced than red or white meat.
Raylan replies, shaking the frying pan back and forth.
Much fatter, too.
He continues.
See all that brownish oil? It just leaches out when you cook the meat.
He takes a steak fork and turns the fillet over. Clouds of steam hiss upwards and are drawn into the exhaust hood. The oily fumes lay heavy in the air. A primal, earthy scent exudes from the fillet.
Crow, I'm hungry.
Saren takes another piece of bread and tears off a part with her teeth. Raylan smiles at her and shows her the dishes.
Then why don't you get started and set the table?
You're the boss.
Saren says, taking a tray with dishes off the kitchen counter. Taryn looks after Saren and quickly kisses Raylan on the cheek.
Any job left for me, boss?
She says, giving Raylan a loving smile.
This feels so right. I want to fall into this dream and never wake up.
Taryn holds onto Raylan's gaze, hoping to shut out the world.
Well, for starters, you could uncork the wine and get some beer out of the fridge.
Raylan pauses with a smile.
And later, there may be other matters to attend to.
He winks at her. Taryn's pleasant dream bursts under Raylan's innocent words. She smiles back rigidly and turns away to fetch the drinks. Saren returns from the living area and nods her head in respect.
Wow! You went all in for this dinner, eh?
She points her thumb behind her, referring to the ornamental tablecloth, fine silverware, and general yellow-red illumination of the living area.
Baby, desert worm fillet is something special.
Raylan lectures her on the finer art of dining.
You don't just eat it, you celebrate it.
He replaces the fried fillet with a new piece. And again, a loud sizzle echoes through the apartment. Behind his back, Saren quietly mocks his ceremonial tone and gesture.
You celebrate it.
Taryn laughs at Saren's spot-on impression. After all the turmoil and insane twists her life has taken lately, she feels unwound in the presence of her triple. With her life's purpose ripped out under her feet, she enjoys falling into oblivion, hoping the fall will never end. The melodious gong announces more visitors. Raylan taps his display to let them in and turns to his friends who are finishing the table setup.
So, this is Arya, Everin, and Kyron. Good friends of mine from a long way back.
Raylan smiles with pride.
You know Everin. Arya is a science hotshot. And you probably know Kyron Thompson, the Discord player.
He introduces his friends.
Play nice, Siren.
He grins at Siren, referring to Siren's sometimes direct and offensive remarks about other people, especially when alcohol is involved.
Sweetie, I always play nice.
Siren purrs, her lips parting slowly for a wide, malicious smile. The door opens and Arya and Everin enter, followed by the towering Kyron, who lowers his head to pass the door.
By the gods, you smell that too, right?
Kyron calls out and pushes Arya and Everin forward with him. All three burst into the living area and wave hello.
That, my dear Kyron, is desert worm fillet.
Raylan proudly announces.
Yeah, you celebrate it.
Siren grins at Raylan, who immediately sticks out his tongue at her.
Hopeless. These Len are hopeless.
He quips, shaking his head. Taryn chuckles and nods to the newcomers.
Hey all, good to see you.
Kyron is magically drawn to the scents that emanate from the kitchen. At the sight of the desert worm fillets, he calls out amazed.
Look at the size of that thing.
It's the tip of the tail. The best part of the whole worm.
Raylan explains.
The hunters said. It was a young chroma adult, about 20 to 30 years old.
He joins Kyron in the kitchen to discuss the quality of the fillets. Meanwhile, Arya slowly follows Everin into the living area, her gaze sweeping over the apartment. She notices the design changes. The earlier smooth, comfortable style Arya remembers contrasts sharply with the open, expressionistic design she sees around her. Still, this part of her life is firmly imprinted in her memory. From sheer bliss to cold departure, she feels overcome by all her memories, but she knows she must put the past aside for now.
Just like Ray said to Kyron, separate your personal life from your game.
Arya thinks cynically.
I just wish I wouldn't have to play.
Arya recognizes Taryn, who sits at the table next to a small curly-haired Len. She instantly feels wary as the Len locks eyes with her, like gazing into the complacent eyes of a sated predator. Everin picks up a glass of wine as she introduces Arya shortly.
This is Arya. She's a student at the university.
Arya casually greets them with a smile and approaches the table. Gazing over the apartment again, she says,
This place has come a long way since I saw it last. Love the yellow-red lights.
She adds and sits down next to Everin.
Ray told me that you and Everin had quite a wild time here.
Taryn jokes to keep up the small talk. Everin cuts in to change the subject.
So, what do you think will happen with this Winslow thing?
She says, referring to the riots in the streets. Both Taryn and Siren freeze for a moment, but realize that Everin means something else. Siren gets up and walks toward the kitchen.
I don't know. Chaos? Anarchy?
She cynically remarks. Real-life events seem so far away for her. How can you compare a change in government with a global massacre barreling down on you? Arya feels irritated by Siren's snide remarks.
My world is already turned upside down.
She thinks angrily.
Don't you care at all?
Arya desperately wants to put Siren in her place, but the time is not right. Evren notices Terran's feverish glances toward Raylan and thinks to herself,
Poor Terran. How can we tell you that Ray is but a puppet in the hands of his father, and that Eureka's life was just a lie after Ray took over?
She watches Siren smiling at Chiron, coyly asking him about the food.
We need all the help we can get.
Evren muses as she sizes up Siren.
She'll take it much lighter.
She thinks. Siren seems to possess an indestructible inner core that fuels her cocky self-confidence. Chiron and Raylan approach with oversized plates, filled with steaming desert worm fillets. Siren distributes bread baskets and sauce boats around the table.
Crow, this smells awesome, right?
Chiron indulges himself in the scenery. All dishes are laid out. They sit down with Raylan and Chiron at the head and foot of the table. Raylan changes the illumination and the background light fades out. A soundscape of the Manth deserts gently echoes through the apartment. Breaths of wind, the trickle of sand and drops of water. A crooning Len voice starts a simple melody, full of hope and confidence.
It's a traditional song about a Len,
Raylan notes quietly.
awaiting the return of her Crow and Ama hunters.
They are all caught by the timbre of the sweet, clear voice. The flickering yellow lights and the smell of the delicious meal take them into the wild deserts of Merin. After a few moments, Raylan taps his knife on the table, saying,
Let's eat.
He splits the first fillet and skillfully uses a large steak fork to distribute the slices onto their plates. He then sits down and grins around the table. Raising his glass, he toasts.
Let this dinner be the start of something new.
Siren has already taken a hasty sip and almost coughs the wine back into the glass. She quickly swallows the wine and wipes her mouth.
Sorry, had to cough.
She murmurs, looking around apologetically. Terran holds her glass up high and looks at Raylan.
To something new.
Chiron heartily downs half of his glass and turns his attention to the fillet on his plate. He cuts a piece of the tender fillet and tastes the meat. The texture readily dissolves in his mouth and releases the extraordinary aroma only found in desert worm meat. Its unique freshness and juicy flavor trigger primal satisfaction, like feasting on the spoils of a victorious hunt. A few minutes pass and everyone at the table is lost in their own culinary bliss. Only the clink of the cutlery and a few
Oh my gods.
This is so good.
Awesome.
are heard, interrupted by slow, deliberate sips of the excellent wine. The music changes into a lively rhythm, and the clear Len voice is now accompanied by other voices and wooden horns, imitating the warning cry of an adult desert worm. The hunt is on. After his first hunger is sated, Raylan glances over the table and observes the happy and relaxed faces of his friends.
Nothing to break the ice than desert worm fillet.
He grins satisfied to himself. He has had the privilege of dining on desert worm fillets several times, diminishing his sense of awe a little. He drinks from his wine and motions at the music in the background.
Now they're fighting the worm.
He explains, as new forceful rhythms take over the beat.
Just like we are.
Siren replies with a full mouth, attacking her fillet with vigor. The others laugh shortly, before turning their focus back to their plates. Raylan smiles at her punchline, which he set up. The music is part of a traditional Manth feast, choreographed to imitate the hunt for a desert worm. Listening to the music, they silently enjoy their meal. Only sometimes a secret glance or blind gaze into nothingness betray their seemingly carefree dinner. One after the other, they lean back and commit to their post-meal phlegm. Chiron is the last to drop his fork, grunting as he rests his tall body against the back of his chair.
Crow, this was the best food I ever had.
He says,
But if I take another bite, I'll explode.
exhaling satisfied. He puts his hands on his belly. Siren teases him by waving a piece of bread before his nose.
Crow. Come on, just one.
Her eyes sparkle with a sardonic smile. Arya also rubs her belly and moans.
This meat fills you quickly, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's rich in fats and fatty acids, but you don't taste it really.
Raylan agrees and gets up from his chair.
But fear not.
He grins as he walks into the kitchen.
I've got just the right thing against those fat droplets I see rising in your eyes.
He calls out, taking a bottle out of a rack. Armed with 6 shot glasses and a bulky glass bottle, he returns to the table.
You see, one clever Marinth ancestor found out that these worms carry sugar-rich glands that go perfectly together with the worm's microbes to ferment alcohol.
He tells them.
Still the juice in the desert sun, and you get Ungus.
Raylan lifts the bottle up high, swirling the contents around. He fills the glasses with the thick brownish fluid that flows out of the bottle and spreads them around.
To something new.
He toasts and downs the shot, bracing for its kickback.
Stop yapping, start lapping.
Seren quotes, also downing her shot. She instantly takes a sharp, deep breath and slams the glass on the table. Judging by the reaction of the others, she is not the only one who experiences a sudden rush of heat and bulging wide-open eyes, strangely with a mint freshness in her breath.
Yeah, that helped.
Arya groans, pressing her watering eyes shut. Slowly, the heat on her face dissipates. Feeling the warmth of the Uungus spread over their bodies, they relish the moment and let their minds go. Each of their thoughts is individual to them, and yet the theme remains the same. The music changes back to the solo Len voice, a melancholic melody alone among the desert sounds. Evren muses over the change of pace in the music and asks,
That's not really a triumphant end to a hunt, is it?
No. This one ends with the deaths of her crow and Amma spouses. The worm killed them both.
Raylan heard the Maranth suite many times before, but the voice seems strangely intense this time. Filling their shot glasses again, he listens to the sad wailing voice.
She laments that her life without them is meaningless, and
he breaks off and clears his throat, regaining his emotional balance. Raising his glass, he pauses and grins at Seren.
Quit yapping. Start lapping.
Meanwhile, Evren succumbs to the sweet Len voice and her sad melody. Mechanically, she also drinks her shot, musing about the sorrows of that ancient Len woman.
How would I respond if I were her?
The sense of loss is palpable for Evren, even in her state of emotional numbness.
And why did he choose this music?
She wonders as the Uungus effect claims her attention again. Chiron gets up and stretches his back, surveying the apartment.
Nice crib, Crow.
He nods with respect. Ambling over to the window front, he gazes out onto the city lights.
Keep it up and you can soon buy it from me.
Raylan laughs, referring to Chiron's Discord career. Arya interjects with her hands at her hips.
Right now, you can keep it up with us and help us clean the table.
She chides Chiron, motioning to the dishes and plates on the table.
As you wish, my lady.
He responds.
I hasten to do your bidding.
Chiron bows deep and strides toward the kitchen. Raylan laughs at Arya.
Amma, you haven't changed, have you?
When Arya stayed here, she always was the one to organize the tidiness of the place. Raylan and Evren always brought her up about it. Arya is stunned, but the joyful mood around her lets her shy away from addressing Raylan right now.
Well, if there are people to help you, why not ask them?
Arya replies, shrugging her shoulders casually.
So true.
Evren answers, fixing Arya's eyes while she sets down the food trays on the counter. Out of habit, she sorts the dishes and cutlery into the dishwasher, wiping away spots of grease and clearing the workspace. Seren watches Arya with interest as she fails to comprehend how cleanup work could be satisfying for anyone. She draws Terran near and whispers in her ear.
This, Arya, is your ideal house, Amma, huh?
Terran lays her arm around her and leads Seren to the window front.
Be careful. That girl is smarter than both of us.
She whispers.
She just doesn't show it.
Terran adds, glancing over to the kitchen, where Chiron, Raylan, and Arya discuss the settings of the automatic beverage system.
So, when do we leave?
Seren whispers impatiently.
The food was fine and all, but these guys don't look like they could help us.
She adds, coolly assessing the group in the kitchen.
I don't know, baby.
Terran sighs in frustration. Smiling weakly at her friend, she kisses her on the cheek and turns toward the living area. She sees Evren walking up to them, 3 beer cans in her hands.
Here, good old lass's beer. None of this imported stuff.
She grunts, playing the part of the simple farmer down south. They pop the lid and drink a sip in silence. Evren nonchalantly gazes down onto the central district streets, preparing for her difficult mission. letting Taryn and Surin quietly know what she knows, without a loud debate about facts and logic.
You know,
She hesitates and clears her throat.
I've not been straight with you on that arm clip business.
She quietly tells them, intently looking at her beer can. Taryn frowns and recalls Raylan's missing arm clip, now a meaningless threat from the past.
Oh, that. Never mind. It's okay now.
She reassures Everin distantly.
Not quite.
Everin replies, looking down at Taryn.
I checked the arm clip for parts, and
She pauses.
I found a surveillance chip inside.
Everin nods slowly to ease their comprehension. She recalls her own response all too well when the implications sank into her mind.
Before you say anything,
Everin whispers and pleads with her eyes.
trust me on what I'm going to tell you. Please.
Everin's eyes dart over to the kitchen, but Raylan is still chatting.
You'll find it very hard to believe, but it's important that you know about it.
Everin's eyes dart back toward the kitchen. She finds Arya's gaze and intently stares at her, slightly tilting her head toward Taryn and Siren. Arya shortly nods at Everin and turns back to Ray and Kyron, listening to their talk. Siren immediately deciphers the context.
That housemaid Amma is in on it?
She asks, surprised.
What?
Arya,
Siren says.
she knows what you know. You want her to stall Ray.
She warily concludes. Taryn is taken aback.
Stall him for what?
She demands to know. I told you, this dinner is packed. How will they take it?
Take what?
You'll see,